Mr. Carl.
Hi, Catherine.
How are you?
Good. And Selma, I've
I go ahead.
uh, regarding having a quick call. So I wasn't available at that moment, but anyways, here we are.
So what I wanted to ask you very quickly was I'm going to be interviewed on Monday, and my hope is that I can mention classes that we have scheduled.
Yeah.
So I am wondering if you would pick a time between now and the end of March to do a webinar on village homes and why it's something that people should pay attention to. And so what I need from you is a date so
Between
that I,
now and March.
yeah, so a date and a title, and then I will put that on our list and get things going. So I'm
So
talking,
you just keep that's how you get me to finally do something. You just keep asking me to do more things, and eventually,
I
uh,
had an interesting uh city council meeting today with the one person that I thought would be maybe the most difficult. And she was just wonderful and very enthusiastic and had lots of ideas about taking things forward. Um, so she's a big proponent of working with golf courses and parks. So
to transform them.
yeah, yeah. And the one city council person that I've had absolutely no response from, she suggested tactics to make him move. So I will try that. Um,
Um, are there a lot of golf courses in Spokane that
yes.
are fallow or whatever is that the right word or not being used?
I don't know that they're not being used, but we do have a bunch.
There's I know
And
this
the
from
city owns a bunch. So we're
but
we're spending money on water. Yeah.
it's a do we call it a phenomenon or it's a situation that many cities are in
Yeah.
because there aren't as many golfers as there used to be.
Huh.
Um, and so they're being underutilized. I know I've had conversations years ago with somebody in Riverside. And,
Hmm. Yeah.
Riverside's, I don't know if you've Riverside, we living in Pomona, we're about halfway between Riverside and Pomona. Riverside in LA, which is intentional because my wife teaches at Riverside,
Okay.
at UC Riverside. There was conversation with people about actually um, using that land for farming and or housing.
Huh. So I
Um,
haven't heard that conversation here at all.
um, so that, just put that bug in your ear to ask around.
I will. I will.
Um, I forget who talked about this, but maybe there might be an opportunity for silly Milwaukee forests.
Well, exactly. And there's
That was
a
more of my humor. The preface of
well, that's where she
some
went.
crazy ladies talking about Milwaukee forests. But that would be a really great opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jim Marchula gave me the name of a guy in Chicago who has been doing biochar and golf courses. And he's got quite a reputation around that. So I've been trying to connect with him to bring him in on that conversation because I also talked, we have a cemetery here, it's huge, and they've just decided to do a natural burial place. So they're all interested in natural stuff now. And so they would be open, I think, to shifting from lawns to meadows. There's no reason not to have a meadow in a cemetery. Golf course,
Would they even mark the graves?
they do, but you have to,
But I'm guessing that it's not actually where the body is
yeah,
just
no, it's actually where the body's buried. I've talked to the guy. It's $5,000 for a plot, and you can bury your pet with you. Um, it's and you don't have to use a uh casket. You can
or the
use
concrete
cardboard
blocks.
or a shroud. Yeah.
I know if in California there was a requirement in addition to the casket, you had to put the casket in a concrete box.
Yeah. 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 That's
And
how my father went. Yep.
um, that was, I think when my mother passed away, so the early 70s, that was standard. And that's
Yeah.
completely, that was just something that the funeral industry lobbied to.
Well, contamination and all that kind of stuff, but it prevents you from being going back to the earth. So there's been a huge movement. I mean, when I got cancer in 2005, I discovered green burials. And I hadn't known much about them, and they were fairly new at the time. And now it's quite an industry, and a lot of cemeteries have picked it up. And there are all sorts of new methods. There's a composting method that really makes you liquid, and you get to go back as dirt, quite literally. Yeah, there's a number of really different kinds of things now that weren't in existence in 2005.
Yeah.
I want to call Ani and see if she's able to get on or where she is. She just moved and she didn't have internet last week. And I haven't had a chance to call her this week, so I don't know how she's doing.
Um, so the village homes, to talk about that a little bit, I think that could be an opportunity to, as a preface of to um, affordable housing and smart development.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly. Exactly. And one of the things that Kitty brought up today is that they need proof of concept that redoing the land would make a difference. So Village Homes provides some of that. Um,
um, I would also and this is what I've done. I mean, it's really about retooling my presentations because that was so I can include the development in Claremont. So you have two, and you can use the big principles are the same: sun, water.
right.
The development in Claremont a little more normal. It doesn't have the food forest,
Hmm. Hmm.
but they both um, have no concrete drain pipes within the development.
Hmm.
And I know from Claremont, the um the the impact, the direct impact on the city storm drain system and therefore the regional storm drain system. The linear length of storm, I know I've said this, but the linear length of storm drain is 20% of what it is on the adjacent conventional
Right.
development. So I think that's a key point to
Absolutely. Absolutely.
shows the efficiency and cost savings.
You were going to connect me with a friend of yours who's into
Funding.
planning and yeah, you mentioned him a couple times because it would be good to make that connection because he,
Oh, so there's probably two people. One is Jack, the planner.
okay. Etik was his last name?
I I sent you his I sent you his
Yeah. Yeah.
blog.
Yeah.
He's absolutely your people. We Earth.
Yeah. No. Well, yeah,
Um,
I mean, if you could make those connections, because
yeah.
we need to beef up the team a little bit and to figure out, if it's relevant to bring him in early as one of the experts. Because the city would be much more comfortable if we had experts that they can relate to.
He
Um,
as a planner, he's
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why it might be
and
useful.
he can speak planning language better than I and um has a deep experience with nonprofits and environmental um um conservation or
Yeah.
anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'll reach out to him today. I'll send him an
Okay.
email,
Okay.
um, and introduce you via email directly, but also,
And
um,
Kitty was really encouraging me to work with parks, and since I'm on the tree board now, my hope is actually that maybe the presentation we do for the city council, and I'm working on getting us a date, we could also do there, even if it's just a video of it. And I would feel like I should do it there and at the other committee that I'm on, the climate resilience thing, as a broad overview of things that both of those groups should think about and to keep them on the same page as the city council. So they don't feel like the city council knows things they don't or are thinking about things they don't, since it would impact them. So I think they would appreciate actually hearing the same thing. So that's kind of what I'm planning on doing. The stormwater people have agreed to be part of our grant. So they're sending a letter of commitment, I guess it is. Uh, and so
um,
I'll be talking to the person that we'll be working with next week. She's somebody I already know too, so that should be good.
when you mentioned the stormwater people, okay, I'm going to push back on you. Yeah,
Hmm.
you do. So, if you can, in the near future, send me a note via email, um, on like some hot points to really dig into for the webinar on village homes like stormwater and how it impacts the city. I would do it anyways, but
Yeah.
let's really fine tune the coordination between what you're, who you're talking to and what, what like these issues, so we can build that into the webinar.
One of the things that came up to my mind when I was talking with Kitty is, for at least for me, one of the underlying intents is to get the city to do an ordinance that would say new development has to design for water first. So making that case of why that's important would be a key part of that. And that's what Village Homes does. So we're talking, savings in terms of the development cost, savings in terms of the maintenance costs. And for affordable housing, that's really a big deal.
And
Um,
potential to start cooling the planet with
and the cooling piece, yes. Um,
one neighborhood at a time.
when I talked to somebody and I can't remember who it was a couple of days ago, and was Johnny, and I have a meeting with him too. So Johnny's doing growing neighbors, and he's making community gardens throughout the city and helping people actually develop or deliver food from the gardens to people who need it via
Hmm.
bicycle. So that's a big thing for him. And he's really built his organization.
Wow, that's
Yeah, he's been
so
at it for.
that so that that's that gets to this, something we need to dig into soon, is how do we coordinate food forest with Milwaukee forest.
Yes, yes, yes. And Johnny's very much into food for us. Um, so so anyway, so Johnny mentioned that the Salish school, and Salish is an Indian dialect that is being reborn here. So we have a school that's actually teaching kids and others how to speak Salish. We've renamed some of our streets in the Salish language. Um, and we often refer to things in the Salish language. And you'll see it written, which you can't pronounce, on a lot of the projects around here. So a lot of the affordable housing projects have a Salish name as well as an English name.
I,
So
I,
they're moving and they're going to get 2.5 acres. And that would be a really good place to talk about Miyawaki forests and Miyawaki from the Indian food perspective forest.
yeah,
So I'm trying to, and they're working with the Affordable Housing Catholic Charities, which is the big affordable housing group here.
yeah.
So that's kind of an in to both of those. And I know one of the VPs over there, so I'm gonna he's another one that I'm going to arrange coffee with very soon. Um, and see,
I really need a chart from you, all these
they just keep coming, don't they? They do.
um can you I put you on pause I'm gonna mute for a second. So a little another sidebar here, but family issue, family thing. Are you there?
Yep,
Oh,
I am.
so Ruth, my wife and I, when between actually 8:30 and about 20 minutes ago, we had one of our longest visits this week because she's been working really late at school, but but then part of that conversation, she was asked me um she wanted to be more clear between you and Nikki
Mm.
because I talk about both of you. I actually mention you more than Nikki, but and I thought maybe if she was acceptable and you're okay, that she could step in here for a minute and like
Oh,
actually
absolutely.
actually see
Would
you
be fun to, yeah, 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 yeah.
and you see her. So
Sure.
um she's putting some okay, here's Ruth, my wife,
Here's
and here's
Ruth. Hi,
Kathryn.
Ruth.
I've
Hey, hi.
heard a lot about you. How are you?
I am good. I've heard a lot about you, so it's nice to meet you. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes, I was just telling Carl this morning that all the stories that I'd heard about you would be easier for me to keep coherently in my mind if I had some idea of what you look like. So that's why.
Well, you're welcome in on our conversations anytime.
Oh, well, that's kind of
Absolutely.
you.
Does Kathryn look like the wonderful older hippie chick that's been around doing great work for so long?
I don't know.
Kathryn allows me my allows me my bad sense of humor.
I'm not going to pronounce on her appearance within 10 seconds of meeting her.
No, it's wonderful to meet you. Yeah, there's another person who's on this call often, and I'm not clear why he's not here, but his wife also is often in the background, and so we bring her in when she's willing to come in because
Uh-huh.
I think it's fine, you know. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just wonderful actually to get to know everybody, and everybody's got ideas and thoughts to contribute to our conversation. So
Yeah.
it's not an exclusive club by any means. Yeah.
I'm Carl's resident skeptic.
That's
I
good.
was the one who, from way back, as he would tell me about his architectural dreams of the bathroom with the glass door and everything, I would say, "Who's going to clean that?"
Yes.
What about the hinge? There's going to be an accumulation of dirt in that hinge. Who's going to clean
That's
that?
right.
Wow.
That's right.
And, I
Yep.
was always that one.
Yep. Well, cleaning is a major part of our life, and many times people don't have any concept about it at all, and that makes more work. So
Yeah.
I spent 10 of my years with the cleaning business, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm very into that.
You ran the cleaning business?
I
So you
did.
had employees doing it for you?
Well, and I cleaned
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Another
very hard work.
another chapter that I
It's
didn't know
spiritual
about.
work. I don't think it's hard at all. It's a way of praising the things you have.
What about the things other people have?
That too. That too. And I found that when you do that, when you really appreciate the things around you and you keep them clean enough to hear their voice, so it's not covered by dust and dirt,
Yeah, yeah.
really opens up your own space. And I saw clients change their lives because their house was clean.
Wow.
You need to come visit.
After we clean up a
I've
little bit.
actually been on
Except we need to clean
NPR
up
with
before
that.
you come. No, I certainly know I've had that experience countless times,
Uh,
but you know,
the most generous way I think of it for myself is we're like too much in our heads and we can let other parts.
no, I don't.
That's my
So
explanation.
yeah, it's actually a relief when you get older and it's easier to see that something will never be useful to you. You know, it's slightly easier when you're 30. There's everything might be useful to you. And also, anyway, my father passed away th
The
4 years ago, and we've never really recovered our space from all of the stuff that was
Yeah,
his,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is really, and that's so clearly like my doing. Like if Carl were to say, I'm going to take care of this, I would say, don't touch it, don't touch it, you know? So it's totally on me, but
Yeah.
yes. Well, it's really nice to meet you. I actually need to go. I was just getting dressed to leave, but it's great to meet you. And now I see your nice
Yeah.
face, and I can put all the stories together with it.
Is it as nice as I said it was?
It's even nicer.
Well, thank you very much.
All
So
right, next
feel
time.
free to say hi. Yes.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you later.
Nice. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, she does too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just fun. Yeah. Yep.
um, uh, so, so, um, so, so, um, so let's think of this. So I want to start thinking about this. I don't want to postpone thinking about, a follow-up presentation on affordable housing, but let's use that as a launch point, which actually means we should plan that webinar. I mean, I can be ready in a couple of weeks.
I just need a date. I need to advertise it. That's what I
Right.
need. So
So,
I've got two other people that I want to also do. So I'm talking to Ole, and his Eco Village in Oregon is for renters, which is like unheard of. And he's done amazing things. I will send you the links to look at his stuff. He sent me two
yeah,
links. So I will send those to you. And the other guy is Mark Lakeman, who gets people who are already in the neighborhood to think about themselves as a community.
yeah,
So those are, I mean, we're just really different ways of thinking about community. So I want that in the article if I can get dates so that the inlander can promote them as
yeah,
well.
and link these three things.
Yes.
Um,
Yep. And I'm also doing it because if we don't get the grant, we're still going to need to do something.
I'm sorry, I cough. Say that again.
So I'm also doing this because if we don't get the grant, we still need to do something. So that will at least give us a presence here. And the article should help. The article should help.
Um, so it's bouncing around. But another possible intro. Um, Peter Donovan, who you introduced me to,
Uh-huh.
or Brian.
Brian Doherty.
Oh, so see, he was the one on the call.
Yeah, Brian was on the call. Peter
And
agreed to do a land listening.
that's
Um,
so Brian, who was the one who you sent me their LinkedIn page? Was that Brian or
I don't know.
because no, it was somebody else who
Oh, that was Jim Archula's
and
thing
he's
on wood.
wood and biochar.
Yeah, that was Jim
So
Archula.
when I went to his LinkedIn page, one of the there was already there obviously you're somebody we have in common,
Yeah.
but there's another person who we have in common is the guy I know in Southern California who's a big biochar. He has a biochar company,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and I can send you his information, whether you want another biochar. Um,
Um, Actually, not yet, because Jim also connected me to Qualterra I've been pursuing that company for 9 months. They were really close in Cheney, and then they were bought, and then they were bought again, and then their phone didn't work, and I lost track of them. And now they're in Pullman, which is an hour away, not that far. And they're on my list to call today also, because if the grant goes through, they would be a good source of biochar because they're right here. And so I want to see if they're at all interested in playing with that. The city is very quite interested in the grant if we get it, because we will be able to, one, say whether there's lead in the soil, which would be a big thing if there is, and two, if we can make a change in that using biochar, that will be a big thing too. So just
You
to,
may have mentioned this. Is there evidence that biochar will help clean the soil?
yes, yeah, it's being used in both water and soil toxicity situations.
Does it does it link to it and kind of keep it there, or
Yep, that's what it does.
so it keeps it from migrating or kind of something?
Yeah, or being in the soil. Yeah, it would take it out of its
It
activity.
actually takes it out of this
Yeah, yeah.
without removing the biochar. Because you talked about somebody who had this idea of putting biochar in and then taking it up, and
Then removing it and reburning it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that doesn't seem to make
Well, we're not going to go there.
that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, yeah. But if you put it down, it stays. It's in the soil. Um, and so yeah. So anyway, so we're working on that. And um,
I wonder if this would be a question for Bernardo, not Bernardo,
Ricardo.
Ricardo as another Bernardo. Um, if the Village Homes has ever used biochar.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think they kind of don't need to because they've been building
Yeah,
soil for 50 years.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I see biochar right now, the way we're using it and the way we understand it, as a 1 or 2 time flash startup.
yeah, it's
And
to jumpstart the
yeah, to jumpstart. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so it's not something like fertilizer that you do every year or that kind of stuff. You don't have to do it that often. So it's
yeah.
only a couple of times and then it's done. But it will stay in the soil and will be useful. And it is a carbon sink, so that's a help. Um, but especially for soils that struggle, I think it really is helpful. It holds water and nutrients and all that. So there, yeah. Yeah. So I do think, and the part of trying to get the compost, um, to get people in District 1 interested in composting and contributing, and then able to get the compost back, because that has never happened, will be a big step if we can do that. And stormwater is very interested because they composting is under their bailiwick. So I'll be working with the lady who's doing the composting stuff. And she's new. She's only been there a year.
Is this a city official? Oh, this is the with the trash people, whatever the garbage.
No, this is the Department of Public Works,
So this is
stormwater.
so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
she is responsible for the compost part.
We have a major master composters training and program here, and they've been working with Bartek to pick up the compost, to do the green bins, all that kind of stuff. And there's a number of reasons why that program isn't really robust. And so we will be rethinking that in the next 2 years about what else it could be that would be economically feasible and actually put the compost back in the ground where it needs to be, and still get Martech the money they need to do the work they're doing.
There's just the idea that these poor neighborhoods that aren't doing it as much, if they can get something back from it,
Yeah,
benefit,
yeah,
that would
yeah,
could help close the loop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll see.
This
We
is
need
just
to
this
figure it
another
out.
example of um it's not rocket science.
Right.
It's just that we as a species are terrible at connecting the dots.
Yeah. So we'll see what they can do. What
Um,
we can do.
um, I'm kind of bouncing. Did you watch the video I sent you with the eagle?
I did. It was lovely. Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
you'd
There's,
appreciate it because of the birthday of his son, who the eagle's first flight was on his son's birthday.
oh, fun. I didn't catch that, but yeah.
But that
Yeah,
that
there's
was
just we are really part of nature, and when we contribute to it, we make such a difference, and there's so much gratitude from the other life forms we involve with. And it would just be a wonderful world to live in, full of gratitude for each other. I don't know why we don't do it.
um uh I don't want you to think that I'm on Instagram all the time, but there's another one I want to send you within
Okay.
this. Um, and I want to send it now so you can. Um,
Oh, I want to tell you a story. So one of
okay.
the stories that I have heard about India was that there was a time when a baby was born in an Indian village, and this is in the country of India, that the elephants would come and the baby would be passed around from trunk to trunk in a circle around the village. Isn't that just a wonderful story?
The elephants would carry the baby from village to village.
Well, no, they would just pass it around a circle
Oh,
around the village. So sort of blessing the baby in a way.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, yeah. And we just pushed everything away.
So this one I'm going to send you. I think these are people. This is a thing I follow. Um, but this one that I saw today was probably the best of all the ones I've seen, and I just send it to you. But I want to watch you watch it. Well, I should say, to me, this is a really profound example, great example of interspecies friendship.
Yeah. Should it come? I assume you texted it.
Yes. Oh, now it's gonna come. I didn't push.
You're doing one of me, huh?
Users,
Oops.
I have a bigly important announcement to make. I'm appointing the great super genius Elon in a new.
There's one city in the world that's ruled by cats.
It went into something else. Is that a magpie?
It is.
I don't know why we call them magpies. It's just not, it's such an elegant bird.
Well, but we don't have them in the States, do we?
Just a minute. I I didn't know they were in Colorado. And we
Oh,
lost a whole bunch of them with West Nile.
hmm.
Oh, it's funny.
So these people post a lot. So that there's Molly the bird has an amazing relationship with Peggy the Staffy. I mean, there's so many things to this. Actually Ruth made commented on this that the way that the bird is lying on on its back playing with the dog.
Yeah.
Oh, and also the dog. I mean, the first observation is the dog um, knows to be careful with the bird, and particularly and I realized that in this video, I mean, with a bird rolling around on its back, one little paw in the wrong place on the bird's wing
Yeah, it could break
could.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Stop it.
this last year, because of their notoriety or their fame on Instagram, the Australian government came and took Molly away because you're not
Yeah,
supposed to
about
have a domesticated
wildfire. Yeah,
um, magpie.
yeah.
And I guess lots of people were outraged and they got her back.
Oh,
Because
nice.
she's not, they don't keep her in a cage. She's free to go. This is her choice.
Yeah.
And the other, I could, another sort of big idea, the way I think about this is that I think it works because Molly's really bossy. She is, and if you watch a few of them, you see her personality. So she has a very big bossy personality, and clearly, I think the dog, at least with her, is quite um, pa passive or
Submissive. Yeah.
submissive, and
Yeah.
so I think that
It works.
it works. Um, I mean, it's extraordinary that the dog it just could hurt this bird so easily.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Anyway, thanks about that.
It's wonderful.
If only we could learn.
Yeah. Well, we've got all sorts of teachers.
Um, sorry for that. So, uh, um, darn, my cold is really breaking up. So I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you how you're feeling. You sound better and you're not coughing a lot. So,
Well, there's just a lot of stuff coming
well,
out.
yeah.
Um, so, what would be the earliest for this class, this webinar, and how long is it?
Oh, I was thinking a maximum of 2 hours, and that includes Q&A and stuff. So an hour, hour and a half, probably.
So, so a webinar is not just it's just 2 hours.
I give the space, and a lot of that should be discussion. So if there isn't any discussion, it won't be that long. But if there is,
So I could
then
really load up on this because actually um my deep dive into village homes in the last year and a half or so, 2 years, started with the question of fire resiliency.
well, that's a good question to start with.
Well, it's certainly timely, and
Yeah.
so I mean, it was literally realizing that healthy trees burn, healthy moist trees don't burn as fast, or well,
Well, there's lots of examples. I think Zach had a couple of, and somebody else who was into permaculture had a couple of places where they had practiced um, keeping water on the land, and the land had water and it burned all around them and they were fine. So that is not a myth. It is something that
um,
happens.
actually, another question to follow up is Milwaukee forests and fires.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about that. I'm trying to reconnect
That's
with
that's a Googleable question.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but
Yeah, I'm trying to reconnect with Ethan. I connected him with Juliet at the U District project, and she's got money and she hired him. So she sent me a card for Christmas that said we're doing a Miyawaki forest.
where is it? Is this where is this? And
It's in Spokane. So she has 280 acres along the Spokane River that belong to um, the college district, I believe. And she's been, so there's, um, it's called the U District, University District. So we have 3 or 4 universities all kind of in a spot. And so it's kind of become its thing. And they have sort of their own governing group that
Mhm.
talks about how to make it work. And they're pretty progressive in their thinking for the most part. Um, and she's been charged with regenerating this 280 acres along the river. So she's been doing a bunch of things. She's been doing charrettes, and she's very vibrant, really feisty, creative, energetic woman. And she has a permaculture background, which I did not know. And her interest has been in food forests. So when we talked, I told her about the Miyawaki forest and I connected her with Ethan. And since she's got money, they're doing a forest. So she'll be the first demo, I think, in Spokane. Um, oh, let me see. So she's been passing out pictures, um, doing swales and food production and meadows and gardens and activated a plaza, blue-green streets with bioswales, all of that. It's going to be quite a thing. And she had talked about working with us, specifically around the curriculum, but I don't think that's going to go very far because I don't think the school district's going to let that go. Where is it? Yeah. So there will be a Miyawaki Forest Meadows and a Ponderosa Pine Grove and a mixed-use residential life sciences building. And they built, one of the big things here was to create a medical school. We have a lot of trouble in rural Washington with getting medical help to people.
Uh-huh.
So the deal was to create a medical school here, and the interns would work in the rural areas, and hopefully they would love it and stay. But at least it would give the rural communities access to good medical care. So they built a school here, and that's part of the U district. They spent $5 million on a bridge called Arches. That was a big, spectacular thing. It's very pretty, very dramatic, to connect both parts of the district over the river.
Hmm. Is it a vehicle bridge or?
No, it's a walking bridge. And that has re-energized the community that bridge, the foot of that bridge hits. So that was hooker heaven. And so now that's been regenerated. Um, and they're getting new things and new businesses down there and all of that. So yeah, so it's quite nice. So I'm got to reconnect to her, which I haven't done this year. And say, yay, I'm glad you're working with Ethan and blah, 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 blah. And reconnect with Ethan and say, yay, I'm glad you're working with Juliet and this is where we are, and that kind of thing. So I have lots of questions for him, but he's kind of slow to answer emails.
I'm actually getting, I'm not ignoring you. I kind of, um,
Figured you were looking up the U district.
no, I'm looking up something else. Um, fire management.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually found I found the article now. I think at least one reference to it. I don't think there's another paper too. So, where are you? Zoom. So the first article I sent you, this is to the issue of fire management. But this is the article I was looking, this is the story I was looking for. The second
Oh,
one
okay. Uh-huh.
is there's a 40-year study in the Yosemite National Park.
Oh.
It's in a particular canyon, if my understanding is they let it go. I think there was a fire and they let it go. They let it repair itself naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, and one of the things that happened is there was more meadowland, more water, wetland developed, and
Yeah.
it's helped reduce the fire risk.
Yeah.
In that first article, if you open it up, there's a really compelling photograph of
The-
Yosemite Valley from 1872 from
yeah.
2020,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at it. Yeah. Yeah.
which is it's a striking note about that we think valleys should have lots and lots of trees,
Yeah.
and it's not natural. In fact, I would incorporate this photograph into this discussion about um, fires and trees. Um, this okay,
Yeah.
this
The
is our big
graphic below it is kind of good too. Fire suppressed forests and ecologically managed forest. Yeah. I mean, we've just got so much to learn about being part of instead of just saying that we like it this way.
um
That's great.
oh, there's a great picture of two in Native Americans, the two older women, and something to do with natural. Um, this is actually something that I came across this years ago, and it fits into this issue. And what if I'm remembering it correctly, um, a contributing factor to the water problem in California
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
is
Yeah. Like
because
the water,
we
if
have
it's not
five.
in the land, it's, yeah.
Well, this particular point was in our mountains, we have 5 times the amount of tree volume as there is naturally, and so those trees soak up water,
Mm.
so they reduce the amount of runoff.
Yeah.
Um, and that picture of the Yosemite Valley is sort of is a nice comparison to demonstrate the point.
Yeah. I would be careful of that one. Um,
That's why
yeah.
that would require. I mean, there's some papers written about that.
Well,
I'd want to learn more about it.
yeah, I've heard other people make that statement too. And then the response is, well, let's get rid of trees. Um, which is not really what you want them to come away with. Um,
Well, my response to that response is um, some trees need to be thinned because
well, they're not forests.
huh?
They're not forests. That's the point. See,
That's that
if they're
you're preaching.
monocropped, if they're
Yeah,
monocropped, then the land is actually not as healthy as it needs to be underneath.
you and I we're on the
So
same
it's
page.
not
So
holding the water so much. So, but see, if it's not holding the water, it's not taking the water away. The point is that the water needs to stay.
right,
And if it's not staying, we don't have it.
so here's my thinking. Here's the way I was thinking about this to your same point.
Okay.
So 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 if we have all these forests with too many trees, probably those trees are
It's the wrong kind of trees, not too
well, but
many.
also if there's if there's too many trees, that also means there's probably not enough undergrowth.
That's right. Yeah. But see,
There you go. See, that
but
was
they're going to worry about undergrowth because undergrowth burns. And it does, but you want it to burn, not the trees.
right.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah. Because if there's not undergrowth, then the only thing that can burn is the trees.
right.
Yeah.
And and
I wish we had.
the natural cycle is the undergrowth burns regularly and not and so but just and this is a larger issue than even
Yeah.
um my question about the timber industry is not forests. It's another bigger question. It's a big like another question to that.
Well, I'm
Um,
thinking that maybe, well, we'll see how much energy the grants take. But in a year or so, really looking at forests and forest fires, because that's kind of its own thing. It has a whole lot of other stuff in
yeah,
it.
I
And
shared that thought with you because you're a safe space, but even to incorporate that into the stuff we've already talking about,
well, there's some value to it because
there
we've had
is,
fires
but
here.
it's but there's we have enough to talk about already, and that would require a bit more,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
some more research or a forest expert.
yep, yep.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I kind of wish Jim was here because that forests are his thing, and he might have some insights on all that.
Um, but so that this that so to this, I wanted to share that article about that study in
Yep.
Yosemite National Park
Hmm.
because I believe it's because it's been looking at it for 40 years. It's
Hmm.
one of the oldest um, studies that provide some the data on the advantages of um, management.
Yep. Okay.
Um, and I think that's what's in there is that um, more meadows developed. I'm at than the normal process. So I guess the normal and that picture with all those trees, maybe in addition to this problem of fighting putting out forest fires, is
Hmm.
we also the second part of that problem is that we just think planting more trees is good. And so which has led to the combination of suppressing fires now over decades, right?
Hmm.
And planting more and more trees as if more trees are that's the
Well, I have
it's
to go to the monocrop. We're not planting forests. We're
oh
planting
but that's I'm with you.
and and the soil. But see, the soil conversation still needs to be there. It's just so amazing. What did I do? I was on a. They're putting up our all our information on inquiring systems so that we're official. So we'll be official in a few days and able to ask for money and stuff. Um, and they asked me about photographs and sent me to iStock, which is a really big place to get images. So I Googled the water cycle, and out of 100 pages of stuff, only one or two alluded to soil being part of that cycle, but was by no means clear that that was true. I mean, it's just not there. Soil is not
It's
part of the conversation. And it needs to be part of the conversation because that's the proof of concept. If your soil is working, everything else works. If the soil is not working, nothing else will work.
yeah.
So you can put in new trees, and it's just if you still don't do anything with the soil, it's not gonna.
Well, that no, that's the
Yeah.
point about the planting in the way the traditional normal way of thinking about forest management was just planting more trees,
Yeah.
and it's like it's like everything else. It's like more is better,
Well,
and
and I'm wondering if it could
more is
be
not better.
right.
Well, it's and this is the Milwaukee forest. It's the
Diversity.
combination,
Yeah. Yeah. And
and
I keep wondering if it could be replanted, if the diversity could be added, and I think it can be as a remediation instead of getting rid of trees, then interplanting with what should be there. I mean, you may be getting rid of some because they're planted too close to really allow the canopy to work, but I do think that that's possible. I haven't heard a whole lot of conversations on it. Like I said, I've seen a couple of videos
This is
of
a
people who have done it.
it's a very new conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
But
probably probably some combination of an academic and um and a Native American,
yeah, yeah,
or an academic that's like learning from the native.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to make those connections, but that's been really hard. Jessie, who I hope will be a new addition to our board, her husband um, works with the tribes. So he works with, there's a coalition of tribes, UCUT, I think it's called. And he works with UCUT. So she's going to see if he can make connections that we've not been able to make. So we'll see if that happens.
Um, I'm gonna go back to another. Sorry. Is Spokane is on the east or west side of the Rockies?
East.
Okay, so the Rockies are between you
Yep.
and Seattle.
Yep. Yep. Which is why we're not close, even though we are.
So this is a little sidebar. So when you talk about
Salish.
Salish, um, I first became aware of them from the video and the history of the this guy who was a map maker, David Thompson,
Hmm.
who and you know so the Salish was one of the
Yeah.
tribes that he was early contact with.
Well, it's a language that is spoken by a whole bunch of tribes in this area.
Uh,
So there's never several dialects of it.
yeah,
But yeah,
but
this,
so he was actually the first Anglo to cross over the Rockies
oh, okay.
because he was interested in making maps and exploring, and he was working for a trading company.
Yeah.
And the way they worked is they would, as they moved further and further west, because the beaver population was
Yeah.
decimated.
Yep.
Um, so, what I think is that there was some tribes on the west side of the Rockies that they had particular problems with because I mean because there was some conflict between the Salish and some of the tribes on the east side of the Rockies and the west side.
Mm.
Um, just as a this is a
Yeah.
lovely it's a lovely history. One of the he talks about this, and I'd love to read his. I need to read his books, his um memoirs and logs. Um, um, but one of the tribes I think on the west side of this here are the Rockies. Um, was you know he um I mean the goal was to get them to trap beavers.
Right.
Um, and then because the good time of trapping beavers is in the winter.
Mm.
And they said, we can't do that. The winter is our time. You know, we've stored up our food. The winter is our time for being with family and spiritual growth.
Yeah. Take that. Oh, good.
The video that I have watched many times because it was a video I used for sleeping with,
Mm.
which is a bad habit. But um, it's about an hour. I mean, it's from the CBC. Um, and it's interesting that he talked about the map making process, and but much of it is, and much of his writings is I think that people say it's as much about the geography and map making as it is a social um, sociological documentation of um, the tribes that he interacted with.
Nice. Nice.
Um, it's anyway,
Yeah.
so he came he was I think 13 when he came he was purchased, hired by the
Yeah, he's probably an indentured servant.
yeah. So he was from a very poor family. His mother was a widow from London. But he was smart kid, so he went to I think they called it Greystone School. I remember. So he was smart enough. So he, so at 13 he'd had enough trigonometry and math, and so people like him were hired or whatever you want to call it by the British Navy and or the um, East Indies Company um, for for um, for map making.
Mm,
Um, but so he became a very skilled map maker. Um, if you Google the Thompson map, he mapped um like 3/5 of Canada and down into the States a little bit.
mm,
All from traveling on foot, canoe,
yeah,
horses. He was the first. He was also the first Anglo to navigate down to the Columbia River to the ocean.
yeah,
Anyway, so
nice.
but his really wonderful insights about um Asadic and other tribes. Anyways, that's stop there. But
Yeah,
um,
Salish is spoken by the Spokane tribe and the Kalispel tribe, and there's a whole bunch of tribes
yeah,
around
that's another one. The Calabas.
Kalispel. Yeah.
Um, all right, so um, so this issue the so this so the question to be explored more is and these articles are good beginning places of the reducing fire risk in good management practice.
Yeah. Well, and I'm real comfortable talking about the fact that wet soil is a really good fire management practice.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
The
That's why soil is so important. It
and
does it.
this is I mean this is how I start this webinar.
Yeah.
I have um um I started looking at village homes anew based on the question of fire, and I've learned all of this stuff, including that it's all about the soil. The soil is if there's one thing that's everything it's about the soil.
Yeah. 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 If we just do that, the rest of it will take care of itself. Yeah.
Um, this is what you're the fellow who's in that call, Brian, right?
Right. Brian
From
Doherty.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I mean, he said that with the take care of the soil
Yep.
and the cows take care of themselves.
There's a guy in Australia who he's got a beautiful video. If he wasn't so far away, I would pursue him more strongly, but Australia's Australia. But he's been working with cattle people there, and they've switched, and they'll tell you they don't pay attention to the cattle so much as they pay attention to the grasses that the cattle are grazing. So it's the soil and the grasses, and making them diverse gives them the ability to put more cattle on their land than they could otherwise without damage. So they've
Yeah.
become grass farmers, actually, instead of cattle raisers.
Was it in our conversation you were talking about um the Australian guy who created the key line.
That's a different person. Yep.
Well, I know it's a different person, but he was I think he's an early adopter of,
Right. Well, and permaculture came out of Australia. Bill Mollison,
yeah.
all the folks were in Australia. Yeah, so Australia's been really big on rethinking their land and that kind of stuff, with marginal success. I mean, they still have the political folks that just won't buy it, and which is why they had the fires they had not too long ago, which were truly horrendous. Just like LA, actually, just like LA, and they lost so much wildlife at that time. It was just really horrible. And I think
Um,
the Amazon did the same thing last year or a year before.
um, who was that? Okay, who was the person that you were talking about? And there's books that are out of print that I know it was you.
Oh, P.A. Yeoman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
So if we do a permaculture event this summer or next year, then Michael Pilarski, Skeeter, is a student of his, and he will bring a lot of that here. And it turns out that Jesse was actually an apprentice of Michael's. So she spent months with him learning his techniques and stuff, and she does kind of the same thing here. So she's an herbalist raising herbs, and he raises natural plants also for herbs and healing.
um, I'm trying to, I know I saved it. This is not this one. Okay, so it was his okay, I'll get back on topic here. I know I saved it. There was a couple of pages that's in one of my, so it's PA Yeoman.
Yeoman, yeah, Yeoman, Yoeman, I think, Yeoman's.
So because I think from the fragments that I read, it was he was really instrumental in um grading the land for
Yeah,
water.
he had a whole thing for cities, and that's the book I'm trying to find, and it's totally out of print. The thing on forests, the city forest, that's in print. You can get that, all of that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the water in cities that are already built, there's almost nothing. I've never seen anything on it. So I'd be really curious on his thinking on that. And I'm trying to pry it out of Michael, but so far he's not wanted to share it.
Um,
Because what I've seen is building cities with that understanding, and that's great, but that's not where we are. We've got a lot of cities already built that need help, and so that's where I'm more focused than trying to create a new city, which, yeah,
well,
China's
I
doing.
think I think I mean, my conclusion about village homes, and this is this guy from this other architect. Um,
Yeah, you could,
those you can it's about taking the principles and adapting them. So it's
that's
to me it's
right.
an easy.
And he had a flat piece of land and he made it. He made the created the hills and that kind of stuff. So yes, that's a really good example. Yeah.
You mean when you say the yeomans or the people
No,
in village?
the developers of Village Homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they were very conscious of that.
But to your question about um retrofitting, I think the lessons are really transferable.
They're transferable. It's just hard to do because we've already got this hardscape we've got to deal with.
Well, it's I mean this is so this guy the other architect you mentioned in Portland, and how much
Well,
are they doing
Mark
are they do
Lakeman has some of that thinking. That's one of the reasons why he's created communities is because you can get your hands on the water in from several yards better than 1 yard. So I think there's a piece of that in his. Um, yeah, I don't know his work that well to speak totally to it, but I think there's a piece of that in there. Yeah.
I actually could dust off there was kind of a dramatic it didn't go with some well with some people I was working with. But dust off another part of my expertise is an analysis for a community in Claremont. There's some good information there and some diagrams.
Okay.
But it's um um a retirement community, or it's but um it's been um called Pilgrim Place, and it's founded for the idea is that it's for people to retire who have um served in some capacity, like pastors and other people who have served um
Religious folks.
religious, but not but these are really progressive thinking people. But most of the dwelling is done in single family homes.
Okay.
So we were able to start creating strategies for linking the drainage from one home to another,
Oh,
because even though they were single family homes, I'll dust off this present
yeah,
this
that
study.
sounds something worthwhile. Yeah. Yeah.
Another experience of Carl's ecological work that
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
um um so that's what we're talking about, but that was easier. It's easier an idea there because it was easier to present because um the land was jointly owned, and there's a great sense of community. They didn't have to work at bringing the community together. They're already
Mhm.
together.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Are you familiar with and I actually need to reach out. There's a book called For the Common Good by um this might you might have um um
Have you looked at Burt Lancaster's work?
the actors.
No. No, Burt Lancaster is in Tucson, Arizona. He's got a
Oh, okay,
ton
yeah,
of books.
yeah.
but he is the only one I know who's really doing things about water infrastructure in cities that are already built. And he's had huge successes and has got lots of thoughts. He's actually somebody I should probably reach out to.
Um,
If I when we do the 2 or 3 day meeting, he would be somebody to have here.
um, well, I can only find it on, I'm gonna just real quickly, I'll just send you um, the link to Amazon because that's the first comes up.
Okay. All right. Yep.
Um,
I happen to like Amazon. I know of all the bad things they do, but there's a lot of good things.
are you a Prime member?
I am.
We're trying to wean ourselves. So the book is
Oh,
the
Herman Daly. I actually met him.
who?
Herman Daly.
Oh, so John Cobb, and Herman Daly, I think has passed.
Yes, he did. He did.
So
Yeah,
John
the
Cobb
Bay Area.
is and I need to reach out to him because I think he's still available. We had some differences of opinions, but John Cobb lives in Village or in Pilgrim Place. He's kind of the guru,
Ah,
and so so that book
I know.
for the common good is a really seminal text in this. That's why I thought you would be, and you did. You knew Herman Daly. Um,
Yeah,
my
I had an interview with him actually. I didn't know what I was asking or talking about at the time, so it wasn't very productive. But
oh,
yes,
um,
we were looking at the circular economy at the time.
yeah. Some of my ideas are a little at the time a little outside of what John would like to think. But my solace comes from the so the guy that I mentioned I often mention who kind of woke me up or exposed me to the idea of regenerative thinking,
Mhm.
who spent 60 years working for the Methodist Foundation to teach and learn. He would say teach and learn sustainable agricultural practices throughout the world. He did postings in um, Africa and lots of places. Um, who has Dean Freudenberger?
Hmm.
Um, so Dean and John Cobb were in that community were huge leaders.
Oh, so John Cobb. I know John Cobb through God, what was it called? There's a religious philosophy around ecology, and John Cobb is a big
John
writer.
Cobb is the
Yeah, 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 yeah. I probably have some of his books actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what's it? It's and it actually comes from Whitehead.
Yep. Yeah. Spent a lot of time with Whitehead.
Um,
Long time ago.
um,
He's
so
very
so
intellectual.
so Dean, between you and me, so to the issue of making this is a conversation I had with Dean a few times about John Cobb's vision for ecological civilization.
Mhm.
Is that Dean would say he doesn't know the first thing about how to build it.
Uh, yeah, that's probably true. It's not his expertise at all. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my talking about Pasta Solar and stuff like that, he didn't register because he doesn't um it's interesting. We're having so much fun here. Um 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 I found I found a similarity in thinking or conclusion in my thinking about my painting process,
Mm-hmm.
this meditative thinking and meditative process. And there was a I think we both felt, both John and I felt it. Um, but the link, the connection is there's actually a direct connection because the um the person who I read after falling upon this process, Susan Langer, who wrote the book Philosophy in a New Key, which I know I've mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
but she actually articulated this thing that I experienced, which is and that you can think not just in text, but you can think in images,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
pictures,
Yeah, that's
symbols.
how animals do it.
Yeah. Well, that's her big contribution to um, um, linguistics.
Mm.
Like she's got the first person to write about this.
I mean, that's how the Aborigines in Australia communicate as pictures. Yeah.
And pretty much it.
Yeah.
Well, in her book, so I came. This is a textbook for a class I took on
Pictures and feelings.
linguistics. But it, but it, but what she said in her book, she said that in Western thinking, if you could not, if you can't write, if you
And
can't explain an
articulate it
idea in text, that's not an idea.
doesn't work. Yeah.
So for her um, writing this idea, suggesting this idea, was quite radical in the 41
Right.
when she wrote it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the connection is that her thesis advisor at Harvard was Whitehead.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
So when I realized that there's a the
Connection.
the interconnect the similarity between John's thinking and my kind of thinking that he had a sense of um was I mean there's a kind of a intellectual whatever genealogy connection.
Hmm.
Um, except that, but for example, so I took from her and I experienced. So she's an explanation of my thinking about modern art,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's not something John Cobb can comprehend.
Mm.
For John Cobb, if you I mean, like for him, Western art is Renaissance art.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's so I've been meaning to, anyway. So this is some just background stuff, but um, I could dust off our study
Yeah.
and maybe find some examples.
Okay. I'm thinking to do an outline of the points to make um, about issues that the city is facing, and then to bring the biotic pump in as a vehicle for solving so many of them in an integrated way, and then
That
to segue into these are the kinds of policies that the city could look at if they want to address these at that level. And that was one of the requests actually that Kitty made to me, is to make requests about policy because they're really leery about spending money. They're
mhm.
very afraid at this point of going broke, and Lisa's doing yeoman's work to try and get the money there. They have a $50 million shortfall because of the last mayor who didn't understand how to do any of that. Um, and so they don't want to spend money at all. So saving money, this is where the golf courses and parks came in, that to switch this would save them money on labor and on chemicals. They wouldn't have to do as much of either, and on water. So those would be cost saving
Well,
things.
this would be a key point in the webinar
Yeah. Yeah.
about the cost savings in infrastructure.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I mean, this is a obvious point, but so um
So I need a date from you and a
okay
title.
okay but so so the summary of these talking points,
Mm-hmm.
let's, we need that because of these three, with all these webinars that you're talking about, we should all, they need to be knit together within these, with those things that you're talking to the city about.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So because there's overarching themes, and
Yep.
let's be conscious about how we link them together.
Okay. And we can do that in the marketing materials.
Yeah,
And I can talk about that in the interview.
and that so the so we can get this, just a quick, even just thinking out loud list of things, so we can start shaping it.
Mm-hmm.
So even on your interview, the this would be the beginning, the start of, the big kick in the ass point is integrated thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean to be stupid about it. I'm just thinking out loud here.
How
If
things
I'm
are
gonna
interrelated.
if I'm gonna do a webinar on village homes and whatever water, and somebody else is doing this and doing that, what are these? There's a couple of talking points that they're cut across all of them. It's water and soil,
Yep.
and the maybe my mantra, which is work with nature. It's always more efficient, cheaper, and more resilient. Always, always, always.
Yep. And so being able to say that and then to say, see, we did this
Yeah.
and there's
So,
village homes, and they say this. And yeah.
so this, like, to the point that, like, and I would make this point is that, so it's more, this point is more clear with the development in Claremont. Um, so if this linear storm drain inlets for this 40-acre development is a 20th or whatever it is of the conventional development. So the developers saved hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't have to buy concrete drain pipes. But it's obvious that if the amount of storm drain inlet, so the first savings to the city or to the region is all the infrastructure for the storm drain inlets. But if you have 20 feet of storm drain inlets versus 130 storm drain inlets, that means also the pipe sizes is proportionally less, all the way down to the ocean
Okay.
or to the river. So so the savings to the city that pays for that, they charge it back, So but when there's a developing land, development, that's a huge savings, a huge, huge savings that could be
Well,
better directed towards housing or something.
right. So what I wonder, and I missed the meeting because I had a client change her time frame. And I need to get the video. So my question, and Marlene didn't really address it very well, was how the $5 billion they spent on tanks and swales is really addressing the issue of saving water. It's holding water. The swales are planted to remove toxins in the water. But the relationship of the swales to the tanks is a bit unclear to me. And the tanks are designed to hold water and then to release it into the river. So, to my understanding, it's not staying on the land anyway. It's just being held before it gets rid of.
Well, this
And
is so the
the
big
point is to
watchword,
bring it back
the
and
big
not cost them a lot of money in the process.
yeah. So the big watchword there is which we could mention. I just wrote this down. Distributed system. So if the
Well,
motto
and it
is,
is distributed throughout the city. They've got a bunch of them. But see, this is where Jim, I think, would really come in handy because he understands that and could speak that language about how to do it.
which
So,
well, I mean, I kind of have a pretty clear idea how to do it, and that's what Village Homes does. But So
Right.
yes, the city has a bunch of these, they have multiple tanks like this,
Oh, yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's not distributed enough. So
Well, no, no.
the
I mean,
failure comes,
they are distributed collective points
right, but there's
to get
still,
rid of them. Yeah. So that's the shift that has to happen. And I think to have somebody with that planning city experience to be able to talk about how that happens in a way that doesn't make them. I've been really tender about this because they just spent $5 billion. And to say,
yes.
oh my God, you did a wrong thing is just not going to
Well,
be a
I'm
happy.
sensitive. I'm now sensitive enough to know say that you don't do that
Yeah.
because I'm learning
So,
from you.
so
But
I'm trying to
so
find the conversation though that would open that aha to, oh, we could just do this. And now
so
it would work.
so this is what this we call Meadowood in Claremont. And so it's not just the less storm drain inlet, but that's true. That's an easier example to understand than village homes because it's more conventional.
Right.
But if there's I think it's 28 linear feet versus 130 linear feet, right?
So
So
that's something
whatever,
planning would get in a heartbeat.
yes. And so, but you can also, in addition to proving the point that the savings and the cost of less, storm drain inlets, which that's concrete, it has to be designed, right? In the size of the pipes. The other part, the other data that it shows is, that, this the whatever it is, so it's 20 so um 22 so 78% of the water that lands on that 40 acres is um, absorbed into the land.
That's a good figure.
I'm just,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm here for you, babe.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
that's so it's and you can't. I mean, you can't test, and you can't. You don't need to go out and measure the buckets of water that are going into the grass. You just know if the city it's working with 22% of the storm drain inlets, then clearly, the same inverse proportion is being absorbed into the ground. Albeit the Claremont ground, because it's so rocky, I can't imagine any better ground for absorbing water.
Mm.
But so if it's less rocky, then you're going to get some less, but the proportion will be similar,
What
all
I'm
things
also
being.
wondering from what you're saying is, and I don't know this, I used to have a connection down there and I haven't been able to re-energize it, but we have a really good water sanitation plant. And I've been through it. I've done the tour and talked to people down there. And they often talk about how good our water is, that they don't chemicalize it near as much as they do in other cities for that reason. But I'm wondering about the cost of processing all of the water that we're putting into the river because it doesn't go in unprocessed, where we've got all these issues about PCBs and all that kind of stuff. We actually won against Monsanto, and Monsanto's given us, I don't know, 12, $20 million or something to help clean up the river. So they're very conscious of not putting gunk into the river. So what is the cost of all of that? And would that change if not so much water went into that system?
Well, I would feel comfortable making this point. So Meadowood, being in Claremont, it demonstrates. So what really like the distributed system is, it's every yard is part of the system
Right, exactly.
for bringing and
Yep.
so that to me that's what a distributed system is.
Yeah, no
And there
argument.
are there are very few examples of a planned development that gets it, that's done it, and we have the evidence in, the benefit with that relationship between the storm drains, this 40 acres. Um, so that, if we weren't if we weren't careful to how we say this to the city, we could say, well, if you do more of this, you can save, you don't have to spend these millions of dollars on all these tanks that failed anyways.
Well, the tank actually didn't fail. It wasn't completed. So they are saying, had it been completed, it wouldn't have had that problem. But anyway, yeah, see, the tanks
I mean,
aren't going
it's,
away. The tanks are there.
I know, I get it,
Oh,
but
yep,
there's good evidence, that we can find supporting evidence that these distributed systems are more resilient.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Village homes,
well, and they have the tanks as a fallback. I mean, if we get huge amounts of water, the tanks are there. So that's not a bad thing.
not
It's
a bad
just
thing, but
we don't want to send water to them. We want to keep it here.
the more the system is distributed, the more resilient it's going to be. So
Yeah,
the
exactly.
soil is better, and it's easy to show them, that healthy, that better soil that's been shaped to absorb water, over time. It's like the village homes,
Yeah.
even during the 5 inches of rain in 24 hours,
Yep.
the ground absorbed it.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Well,
Yep.
and also the point that this lesson that um even very early on, um the Corbetts kept saying, we want to do this naturally, we want to do it naturally, and the city said, nope, you have to have drain pipes, you have to have drain pipes. And the city finally relented, but they said, but you have to put up a bond because when the first big rain, it's going to flood. And they had a big rain 3 years in, and it was one of the few neighborhoods that didn't flood.
Yeah.
So these are, so yeah, so
Those are the
let's
stories. Yep.
create a list of the big ideas that link these three webinars you have in mind,
Okay.
and cross and get the crossover between that and your conversations with the city, so we can really dial them in. And we can also then these webinars can be used either as the recording, but also, or it's the same information as presented as in
Yep.
a PowerPoint.
Yep. And they're going to have to hear it more than once. So, yep. Okay.
Lots of great stuff.
Yes.
They
Very
keep getting
exciting.
clearer and clearer. This is always nice to. I guess it worked out that Anna and
Yeah.
Jim.
I'm going to have to call her. Yeah. Um, Robert is facing a lot of health challenges. So he's
Oh,
slowing down a bit.
how old is
Um,
Robert?
79, I believe. Somewhere in there. Yeah. Yeah. And he's doing his own thing. So he's doing his own thing and he's very comfortable with the process and the possible results. So
Are you talking something specifically medical or?
yes, no, he's got
Hmm.
a number of really specific medical things. And
I need
on
to
the
lose weight, but other than losing weight, I've been very, I've been very lucky. I need but to continue the luck here now
yeah,
at
no, I've
65.
been really fortunate too. Yeah. I mean, even though I've had issues, it's been mechanical more than anything else. Although the cancer wasn't, but yeah, that was not a real issue either. It was a great experience. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
And Annie's got mental stuff. So she's my age. She's 83. So
is that why she busted my butt about the about not being personal enough?
she is really laser focused on making sure that conversations are meaningful and really authentic. It's really a skill she has.
Hmm.
And when she's present, we really tend to go much deeper and to be much more um, self-exploratory about what things really mean and how
Mm.
we really interact with those things. It's really a skill she has. So
I, I
she's
I
sorely
remember one of
missed
the
when she.
earlier conversations where um she was saying something, and I guess I would, because I live in my head too much, but I there was something the way she was, her actions were, to me, I thought, demonstrating a bigger, um deeper personal thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um and So I kind of get that. I guess I would, be, and not be defensive. I think she has, at least in sometimes she's, my impression is she's a little bit closed in on what her expectations of how it's going to go.
Well, she keeps bringing it back to that kind of approach, not so much the topics, but the way in which we're dealing with them, which I think is really good practice for all of us. Because I can get into my head too and talk about stuff. And there's really um, one of the really rich places to be, and something that I'm really working hard to incorporate more in the way I interact with people is the difference between talking, how to phrase this. Ah, I kind of lost it. There's a tension between talking about something and being in that space from it.
Yeah, I'm working at it
And
too.
and it's a major difference. When you talk from it, it really grabs people, it really lives, it just shifts the whole conversation. When you talk about things, you get all up here and you get sidetracked and you don't really address real issues. And Ani's really, really good at refocusing about being from that space, whatever that space is. That's where the authentic piece comes from. And she's very skilled at that. So, yeah. But she's also,
I did take her comment to heart, but but both sides are important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and she's in a space, it feels to me, where she's, um, and Robert too, to some extent, where they're closing down, that's just kind of what happens at the end of life. Um, so yeah, and there's, especially with Ani, there's this desire to do and be where she was like 10 or 15 years ago. She's done some amazing things in her life, and she just does not have the energy or the capacity. She's really
Hmm.
doing less in some ways. And yeah, so there gets to be a sense of repetition to some extent in what she says, because she just isn't opening to that anymore. she's
Yeah, that's how old is she?
she's 80, 82, 83.
Oh, I thought maybe she was significantly older.
No, no, I think we're about the same.
Um,
Yeah, but you have to really work on that because it'll sneak up on you.
yeah, I mean,
It gets really comfortable.
well, that was one of my conclusions from her conversation, because she was talking about this work that she had done with this other person,
Mm,
and I felt that she was holding on to that too much because it was,
yeah. Well,
um,
Barbara Marx Hubbard was really significant. I don't know if you know who she is.
I don't, who is it? Barbara?
Barbara Marx Hubbard. Yeah, she's very significant. She was a huge mover and shaker in the 70s and 80s and 90s for New Thought and
How do you
stuff.
spell her? Hubbard, H?
Hubbard. Yeah, if you get the Barbara Marx and then anything else after that, you'll get her, I'm sure. She's got
Hmm.
a ton of books out. Yeah, she came and heard me do a talk on leadership at one point. She said, "Oh, just keep doing what you're doing. You're fine."
All right.
So I never got heavily involved with her. But she was a guru type of person. And there's
Is this in the Bay Area or California or?
yeah, yeah, it was in the Bay Area. Yeah. And she so living and working with somebody like that had its own requirements, which Ani has decided she does not want to do anymore, which is fine. But she doesn't see other options, and she's not. It's one of the problems with being a follower. It's really hard to step out on your own, and I think that's another little piece of it. Although she's done that in the past in other places, she really has. I'm really hoping that she can get her books into digital format so that they'll exist beyond her. But I don't know if she has the capacity to do that at this point, and I don't have the capacity to do it for her either. Um, so we'll see whether that happens. But her sister's willing to help. Um, but just has to be somebody to do the typing. It won't be Ani. Ani wants to do it, but she's just not. I think learning a new program because she uses Pages, so going from Pages to Word would be too big a step
I
for
don't
her
even
to
know what Pages
really.
is, so
Yeah. Well, it's the Apple version of Word.
oh,
Um, and it's different. It's much more design oriented, so you can do more beautiful things with it. I actually often do my presentations in Pages and then import them into PowerPoint and that kind of stuff.
but
'Cause-
she hasn't learned how to the translation or.
well, it's a whole new program. I mean, Word is a whole new program, and that's its own journey. And I think that would be a stop for her, actually. That's not necessary. She can pay to have somebody do it, but whether she'll actually do that or not, I don't know. That was my suggestion that she hire a college student to retype all her manuscripts because they're in hard copy. So you can't publish them on the internet until they're digital. So they have to be retyped.
How many pages are there, roughly? I mean, how many books?
I think she has two, and they're probably a couple hundred pages each.
That's easily done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If she lets it go, and we'll let somebody else do it. It's true.
Well, this is our conversations are expansive and internal, and I don't know if today's the time to tell you, but my experience at Yale is a very,
Oh,
I think um there's a the experience is my experience. This is specifically my application process.
mm,
I don't know if I've ever shared. I think I
mm.
shared this with Bruce, but it says a lot about my big questions about perspective. But in some ways, if I had been more attuned to being an academic, I would have been further along with these ideas. But that's my life,
Well, I
but
chose to step out of academia because it was too small a pool.
well, so I'm coming to terms with so when you apply to schools like design schools, you submit a portfolio and an essay, and I was very clear at the time about this role of painting and Lisitsky, the the meditative process stuff, and I wanted to go to a school like Yale to study these questions in a more academic environment versus Cal Poly. And so my portfolio had some schoolwork and some of these other things I had done, but some of these painting processes, some of my paintings, in my essay, it was about I said I wanted to explore this question about painting and architecture and how we think about space and perspective and all that, right? And um, oddly enough, when I applied to schools, I applied to 4 schools. Um, and of course, in the Ivy League schools, everybody applies to the same schools. I
Mhm,
was I was a bit more independent. I didn't apply to Harvard. Yale
mhm,
was as snooty as I thought I would go. And my first choice was Columbia because it was in New York. I wanted to go to New York for not really, because it was New York. And but a professor friend of mine suggested I apply to more than one school.
Mhm.
So I applied to Yale. And probably my order of preference before I went back to look at the school was New York, Columbia, Penn, Princeton, and Yale.
Mm.
And I, just before I leaving to go look at the schools, another professor he said, well, you've been in enough studios to know that when you go into the studio, you'll know which one is right, which
Mhm.
is so. So what I realized at Columbia, so anyways, my preference switched. So Columbia became really I was not interested, and Yale kind of became my first choice. And it's
Mhm.
because of the connection between art and architecture,
Mm.
which has been around forever. And in the
Mhm.
building that the art and architecture schools are in the same building.
Yeah.
Um,
I
um,
used to get the Architectural Digest just for that reason.
well, so even before modernism, Yale has always been, Yale actually has painting programs, Harvard doesn't.
Yeah.
So the art in Yale is much deeper. And
Right.
um, anyway, but the book, my portfolio, because you're supposed to, you try to be clever, to be unique and stand out. So I decided to, my portfolio is I bought these books for 25 cents at the used bookstore that are all about the same size, you and I cut out enough pages so when I inserted like an image or something, it didn't get too big. And I actually spray painted because spray painting was part of the language of my paintings. I spray painted over the text to mask it out. But because Yale, this is, I think, a really worth. So because Yale was my last choice, I was a little bit um, tongue in cheek. So
Mm.
the book that I put my pictures in was a Walt Disney World of Knowledge, a children's encyclopedia book. I mean, these books they're only they're half inch thick. I was looking for books that are about the same size. Each page is about 8 the letter size. The book overall thickness is about a half inch, and that was one of the ones I found that the size. Um, and then and I put on the cover of it, taped, uh, glued E equals MC squared to make reference to 20th century physics and 20th century art or something. And so the first sign when I got there, in the first couple of days, I was in the elevator with somebody who obviously was another architecture student, and she said, um, "Did you really put your portfolio in a Donald Duck book?" So my Donald Duck book made a huge impression. I was, my reputation preceded me,
Yeah.
and I eventually met. There's a woman who had graduated the year before, still hanging, it was being around, and she told me um, that um, because she was on the committee, they didn't have a vote, but she was able to argue, and she really argued strenuously for my acceptance.
Oh.
And I was waitlisted, but the list got down, and but I think it was from her I learned. This is becoming a little bit fuzzy. But I think from her I learned, and maybe in another, I might be mixing characters. But what I learned, and this is not just about Carl. So this is what's the big point of the story, and because this is about Yale or academia or Western culture. So what I learned is that the faculty people on the committee, they were both amazed that somebody who was 26 had such a clear idea or clear theory that was nothing like they'd ever seen before.
Oh,
Which is now, if they were really great people, they would have like, let's bring him in,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Instead,
they
they
were
were afraid
not.
of it. They were afraid of it. Yeah.
So, and this is I think this is a really huge story that needs to be. But what they did with, because I had put this portfolio and these ideas in the Donald Duck book, this is so perverse. And as I say this, I'm getting more and more. I'm just sharing the story more. It really, like, the level of perverseness that it demonstrates is really huge. So because I put in a Donald Duck book, their conclusion was, okay, so this guy has created this idea that they've never seen before. Like, it seems totally revolutionary, blah, 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 which is the perspective whole thing, right?
Right.
That you, so, but so here's this 26-year-old kid who has this idea, but because he's put it in a Donald Duck book, he has created this idea to make fun of us.
Right.
Isn't that like,
Well, and that
it's,
there's the
it's,
truth of that is that their beliefs have a sense of it's really old school and it is kind of silly. And they're really sensitive to that.
it's, I mean, that story says a lot about a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so like a
Yeah.
magnanimous person, would like,
No,
but
they're
to go
self-protective.
from this guy, they couldn't think this guy is really smart and he's had these insights that are new. To go from there to, well, yes, he has those, but he's only done that to make fun of us. That's really, but that's really kind of nutshell
Yep.
what's
Yep.
Western thinking or thinking.
Yep. A lot of it. Yep.
And
Yep. 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 Yep.
anyway,
And,
that's
well,
my
it's like medical doctors who don't want to learn about successes because then that would have meant that they killed all these people before them and they just couldn't bear that. So they don't want to learn. I mean, I've heard stories like that too. So it's just
what do you mean by that? How does that work?
so, well, because I didn't know it when I was doing my past service, then I'm a bad person because I killed them because I didn't know what I now know. I mean, it's not logical. This is not a logical
Yeah, yeah,
process. It's a way of protecting yourself from feeling less than before.
yeah.
And it's all about ego. It's all about that kind of stuff. So I'd rather not know. I'd rather not heal people going forward because I would have been a bad
I,
people
yeah.
because I
I
didn't do
said
it then. I mean, it's crazy. There's no
it's
rationale. Not
to me,
logical.
that's, and this needs to be some part of a story from it. But this idea that they would go from, wow, these are really interesting ideas, and this is what we would want in a place like Yale, to, he's just he's
Well, they don't
I
want to
ha,
lose their old ideas.
like, how did, like, how, like, like, when you start asking the question, perspective was invented in 1413 when you're 20 whatever, you're, a couple years out of before college. You don't come across ideas like that from saying, I'm going to apply to graduate school in a couple of years and I need some hook to build up with this theory. That's not how that works. it's
But
so
that's not where their mind is. They're
it's
not
not.
interested
It's
in you. They're interested in protecting their reputation and what they know. People, I mean, even Andy, who is now getting to be on our side, when I first told him about the biotic pump, this is a guy who spent his entire life protecting the Spokane River. And I'm telling him that it's the soil around the river he needs to protect if he wants to keep the river there. And he's telling me, you're upending 40 years of science as I know it. Who the hell are you? And walks out.
okay. So what you just said is a talking point. Protecting, if you want to protect the river starts in the soil
Yeah.
miles
And when I
away.
got around to that and talked to him about, he knows that. He knows rivers come out of
No,
the
but this is
hillside.
what we should include that point in the webinar in
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
point that, and saying it gently, that it's, interesting, hard times requires relearning some things.
Yeah.
But you can't say it that way, but it's
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. I think we can make the point. I mean, and the way I'm starting all my conversations with the city council is I want to talk water. We've had conversations about water for a long time. We really worry about the aquifer being dry because we're pulling from it. We're not refreshing it in any real way. And if we, and then I go, do you know how much water we use? And do you know how much water we get? And if we kept what we get, then all of these things would happen. So that's kind of
so the refreshing of the aquifer means as many lawns, yards as possible.
that's right. It's got
And
to,
that's the distributed system.
that's right. Right. So those are kind of things they're already thinking about, but this is a new angle on it, but it's not grossly different.
That's the
Yeah.
anyway. So thank you for that. So that's Carl's story. That's
Yeah, that's great.
and it's
Yeah.
and
Sad,
and
but
my
great.
experience at Yale, left me a bit damaged because I was raked over the coal by some really famous people about my painting process.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's sort of second
It's
story.
really hard when people get fixed into who they are and what they know.
The So one of the reasons why you go to a school like Yale is they have their advanced studios have very famous critics.
Mm,
And um, my last studio before we had I have four studios because 4 semesters. The last one was a thesis. My last studio with a group was a guy Robert Venturi,
mm,
who some people think of him as the most important architect in the world in the second half of the 20th century.
mm.
He was really important in postmodern architecture.
Okay.
Big deal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And um, 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 he actually, so when he agreed to do a studio, between then and it takes a couple of years, he had by the time this is this I guess the fall of 87. uh, he was working on one of the most important commissions of his life, which was the um I don't think it's the West a new portion to the British Museum.
Oh,
Pretty freaking important.
oh, you know what was lost in the LA fire so far that I know of?
Well,
The Theosophical Society's 400,000 records in history.
oh God.
Yeah. Letters, pictures, books. Yeah.
Too bad it wasn't in a steel building, but
I don't
uh,
know if that would have saved it. The building might be there, but not the intern.
but there's a
Yeah.
way to I'll send you a picture of a steel building that was caught on fire and didn't burn down in Colorado. But that's so. Um, so he wasn't very much part of the studio. So his right hand man was the kind of the was the most responsible for the studio, particularly the first half. Um, and he started working for Robert. He was actually part of a studio at Yale in 1973, which was the last time Robert Venturi had sought a studio, which produced a book that's probably one of the most important books on architecture in the last half of the 20th century, called Learning from Las Vegas, which maybe you've heard of it. But um, so, so two things. So in the process of you know finding a studio, you're allowed to submit your portfolio to your choice, and the studio critic gets, I think, choose 2 or 3 people out of 13, I think, people. They call it portfolioing. So they get to decide, oh, this I want to work with this person, or And it's,
Mhm.
I was actually selected twice I portfolio twice,
Nice.
but which is, but it was the Donald Duck book. I think it was the Donald Duck book. And it was very clear this paintings, so it was all there. So I portfolioed it into that studio. And in the guy's presentation, his name is Steve Eisenhower, he said that, well, and he was a student. If you didn't make your professors angry, you weren't doing anything interesting. You see where this is going. And so he should have expected me to be doing paintings because that was, but their idea of modernism was not it's not,
Right.
and and I was very clear enough to know that his process, his use of symbols is very different than my ideas of symbols because my idea of using symbols comes from Carl Jung. But I thought, well, we could have that conversation. So um, we did two projects, but in the review in the last project, and Robert Venturi and his wife Denise Scott Brown were there. I was just like, if there was lynching allowed, I would have been lynched. They would just hated me, and it was so nasty
Oh,
that Robert Venturi's wife, Denise Scott Brown, who is really important in this whole, but in the not in this history of his work, um, um, in the end, it was her who said, "Well, you're clearly doing something that really makes us angry." Um, um, and there's value in that. But of course, she was as much as she hated my work, she was a woman, it was a woman who was going to say that.
yeah.
Um, Eisenhower, this other guy, after the studio was over, the review, we had dinner or whatever, and I wanted to say goodbye to him. I made him so angry, he wouldn't shake my hand.
Wow.
And I tried to thank him, but he wouldn't even talk. He just made this guttural sound. From the guy who said, if you don't make your professors,
You're
um,
not. Yeah.
if you don't make them angry, you're not doing anything interesting. So
Mm.
it's an example. He can say it, but he can't live it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's mine.
Yeah. No, I long ago learned that there's no sense talking to people who aren't going to hear you, no matter how important they are. You just have
I,
to go do your thing,
I'm
and
just
it
starting to
will
learn
speak
that.
for itself eventually. I've watched people really crucify themselves with the hope that the people who hate them will somehow learn to love them. And it's sad. It's just sad.
That's me. So,
Yeah.
so I'm now meeting people like you who actually can, I can share,
Yeah.
are smart enough to are insightful enough to appreciate. Anyway, so those are my battle scars. But
Yeah.
it's profoundly important, amazing examples of what's wrong with our thinking.
Yeah. Well, and it's personal growth. I mean, that those are all ego things that people have to feel strong enough inside to be able to change and to not to see themselves as bigger than their ideas. When you get really vested that your ideas are who you are, then it's really hard to change them. I've
Which
got a
is
whole leadership program on that.
well, this is so, and this is kind of the discussion on Tuesday morning ad call.
Yeah, the sense of identity is just key.
Well,
If you
there was a
are,
lot of talk about the fire,
yeah,
and um, I mean, I was the one who like knows who know like a whole lot more about building and fires and blah 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 and the whole thing about trees. Um, um, but the biggest this I presented this idea of connecting building with steel, thinking about steel as a natural, how we think about natural materials, and we need to save our trees, all that whole thing on the small water cycle. But at one point I said, I'm trying to figure out how to communicate this idea of to the green design world that we should stop building with wood. But I said I don't have much confidence that that's going to take hold because the industry is so invested in wood.
Sure.
But that's the task, is to
Yeah.
how to get that story out there.
Yep. Yep.
But it's that's my lesson from Yale, I guess. But it's they're heavily invested in wood.
Well, that's the whole problem with change, period. I don't care where you go or what you're talking about, is the people who have the power have an investment in the way it is. And you're asking them to give up everything they've earned and make a difference. I mean, that's an ego thing. That's about this person here
Yeah.
being
So
open, comfortable enough, and confident enough in themselves that they can make that change. And not everybody can. I mean, I did a consulting job with Public Works in San Francisco, and the guy in charge of it was an architect, and he was in charge of the engineers who did sewer and water, who had no respect for him whatsoever. He never got his hands dirty. He didn't know what they were dealing with. He sat up here in this ivory tower and designed things that then they had problems with. Why are they going to listen to what he says? But they listened to a guy like them who I worked with because I was astute enough to know that he was the one that they actually followed. They didn't trust this other guy at all, even though he hired me and he was paying me.
yeah,
So, and the guy that I was working with was big enough to say, what I used to do is wrong. I'm now working with you in a different way. Watch what I do and don't listen to where I used to be. He could say that publicly.
yeah. I mean, that
Okay. Not everybody can do that. And that made a huge difference because people would hear him. They wouldn't listen to anybody else. He was the only one with the cachet enough to be able to make that, and he had the ego strength to do it.
so as we work together, as we are more and more, so um, this question about wood and the small water cycle, and um, that our lumber comes from monocrops, because that's the kind of like the big message to the green design industry is your wood is not natural,
Yeah.
and it has all these negative ecological impacts.
Yep.
Um, and anyways, it's a huge question. So let's put that on the on the
Well, I think
task.
those are a series of articles, and we could do presentations at um, places where those kinds of folks gather.
Yeah. Well, but I think that your expertise is um how to communicate those hard questions and
I
knowing how
try.
to,
Yeah. Without scaring them too much.
yeah, because I am going to send my I that I'm going to send to Brian, the water guy, who was on the
Hmm.
call yesterday.
Hmm.
And actually, I was quite flattered. Several months ago, he talked about writing an article together, which I was like, whoa.
Nice.
Um, but I asked him through the chat if, I
Oh,
told
it
him
was
what,
that Mitch.
huh?
Was that Mitch?
Oh no, this was on the on Andrew's call yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it might have been on Tuesday.
All
It
right.
might have been, I think it was Tuesday because Brian wasn't. So because Brian comes into the ag thing, Brian from Australia.
Yeah.
Um, And so I just in the chat
Eric.
mentioned kind of what I'm doing, and I told him I had written a response to one of his comments on LinkedIn. I don't think he
Mhm.
saw it, but I asked him if I could, if I'd like to send the note to you and talk to you about writing an article together.
Mm.
So that's good for me because he knows how to get articles published.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's exciting too.
Yep. 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 Yeah, I
Um,
have felt a willingness from him to work with me also. We haven't quite figured out on what though. Um,
well,
so
maybe
we'll
this is a three-way thing because but the question about wood comes from a monocrop. That's a big freaking question that needs to be handled.
yeah. Oh, and talked about that. That's not
Well, but it's how you start to ask that.
right.
It's You are
Well,
asking the design industry to to change.
right, right.
It's, maybe
Well,
that's not the only thing that you and I are working on or trying to get people to change, but that's
well, and part of that I think is just getting them to realize the problems is what they're working with now. And when they're really convinced about the problems, then the question naturally arises, what else do you
yeah.
use?
Well, okay, so we'll work on this. We'll craft this. One of the things I've actually, and I've my conclusion to this thing that I'm gonna send to Brian is I try to draw a parallel between um any other monocrop agricultural product that we
Mhm.
know that it's fluff, it's just calories with no nutrition,
Yeah,
and the trees are the same way. It's fluff,
exactly.
it's less dense, and it's all empty calories that burn faster. It's
Yep,
it's
yep,
it's the same.
exactly.
It's that. I mean,
Yep.
that to me is a profound also insight. It's exactly the same. Which back to the
Fast
okay,
food.
fast food. So that's part of I want to craft that, but it's
Right.
it, to me it's another example of this my mantra of the mantra of you work with nature. It's always more efficient, more uh, more cost
Brilliant,
effective,
beautiful,
and
cost
more
effective.
resilient and more
Yeah.
beautiful. And so, so, and the old me would just go out and say, "You idiots! Of course they burn down. It's all empty calories." But they're not going to hear that.
Yeah, you got to make the case first. Yep.
All right. Well,
Yep.
this has been a profound and thank you for letting me share that. So now you really know that Carl's crossed the bear and um um it's interesting to be, at 65 and you think back. So these ideas, so these guys thought that it was like really amazingly unique and smart and like, where does it come from when you're 26? But it's taken me 40 years to recover from, not just recover, but it's, at some point, at some level, I believe my openness to new ideas comes from growing up a poor kid from a father who's an Air Force sergeant. All this, the prestige and all this stuff. That's not what to me. It's. I've been free from that burden,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that helps you think more clearly because
It does.
so
Yeah.
that's
For me, that's part of the wisdom of learning to work in a sick culture is to be able to see those leverage points and avoid them. And sometimes you do it consciously, and sometimes it just happens. In my case, when I had cancer, if I'd had insurance, it would have been much harder for me to do what I did
yeah.
because the insurance would have paid for everything. It would have been free if I'd done their thing. But I didn't have insurance. So I get to do what I felt was right and figure it out. And that we have this uh, I mean, the whole insurance industry right now, it's going to collapse. It cannot afford to deal with the situations we're affording. And we're going to have the same thing with governments. We don't have the money to pay for the problems we're getting into. We just don't have it.
Well, we'd
So
have a
we
lot
have,
more if we didn't keep getting tax breaks to the.
well, yeah, there's a different way of funneling money. That's all true. But that's not the point. The point is
Yeah.
that it really makes us dependent instead of resourceful. And actually, the far right has that idea in their head, although they don't really get how it
They
is.
come to the completely wrong conclusion.
They come to a different conclusion and they want to blame somebody. They still don't take responsibility,
Yeah.
even though they want to be independent and all that. They don't really want to be independent. They want to, anyway,
It's they believe in social welfare for corporations, but not for.
for themselves, right? But not for everybody else.
But that's all. But
Yeah, but it's really understanding the resource. I mean, that's part of my whole thing about technology is that we're creating all these crutches instead of learning how we can do it ourselves. For me, the internet is like the perfect example. We so want to communicate. We so want to be able to talk to everybody, but we will not trust our minds, which is where that communication actually happens. And it's free and you can do it all the time. But we don't do that. We want something tangible out here that we feel we can control instead of really trusting because we don't trust ourselves and we don't trust other people.
Well, this is the core belief that we both share. To me, that's maybe the top lesson from the perspective machine.
Mhm.
You know, that image of
That's right.
drawer, you know,
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
you
You
need
get
that
dependent on
machine
the
between
grids.
us and the thing.
That's
And
right.
boy, it just is.
Yep. It really messes things up instead of making them better. Yep.
And
It's a
it's
seduct.
it's so AI, in some way AI, computer, whatever, VR, virtual reality and stuff.
Yeah,
Those just all the same thing. They're just a
exactly.
machine that we don't want to trust.
Ourselves. Yep. It's just pushing us away from ourselves. Yep.
So this is another big principle that we need to incorporate somehow. And this is um I think we could say something to the effect of you know trusting ourselves with nature more.
Trusting
For
nature.
village,
We've been taught not to trust nature.
yeah.
And people will say, it's ferocious, it's horrible, it's uncontrollable. Look what it's done to us. Um, who
Even
was it?
now, I think this idea of wildfire,
Yes,
it's
that's what I was
nature.
going
It's
to
not.
say.
And we haven't
It's
done it to
not a
ourselves. It's
wildfire. It's a landscape catastrophe.
yeah.
Yes, that's what it is. Yep. Yep.
I'm sorry. Anyway. So it's these are very.
Exactly.
There's an opportunity because of So the big LA fire is more important to the world than the Santa Rosa fire
Yes.
but
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it is bigger, and we know more people that were impacted by it than you do in Santa Rosa.
and also so if in some ways if it had been this if it was the LA fire first, now 7 years ago, 2017, whatever that is, if it was if so this the catastrophe or the seriousness of it is further exaggerated because of the Santa Rosa fire and all these other fires. It's
Yeah.
this, so it's not just a one-off thing. Um, anyway, so it's but it that from like to me this the key idea is, I think, like the number one thing is trusting ourselves with nature and being open to learn from it. And the village homes, they
Yeah.
trusted nature.
Yep.
They
It really
and they designed to it, and they didn't have to buy concrete drain pipes. They bought fruit trees
Yep.
because they trusted nature.
Yep.
All right, there we go. That's the idea. Solved.
That's why the biotic pump is so important because it's how nature works. And if we do it, we too will be cool.
Okay. Okay, so we've been I guess it was meant to be not Anna and Robert today. It was so,
Yeah, just us.
um so certainly a deep dive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So
Listen.
yeah, we'll talk soon. Well, work on this. Let's this. I don't know, just like probably a half a page of talking points that you want to
Okay.
bring together these um webinars and your
Yep.
end of the city
Yep.
that we can focus. Keep repeating the message.
Okay. Perfect.
I'm going to send you one more video that I shared
Okay.
with um and this is of Lola.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, I just missed my dog by a day. His name was Ridley. He was a cinnamon colored Shih Tzu. But somebody got him first. So,
oh, you told me that.
so I'm waiting for another one. I'm hoping I get the message early enough.
um,
I tried to go over in the morning and they're only open at noon, so that's just not a good, that's makes it hard.
don't tell Ruth this, but yeah, I want a couple jobs and sort of to come in and stabilize, so I know my schedule more. But I want to I want to get a friend for Lola.
Uh,
Um, but this video, this is from a couple years ago, and but so one of Lola's endearing things is, and it may be with the breed, a bit of the breed, I think. But when she's really being loved, she, her, you'll see this. She moves her tongue in a certain way.
uh,
I think I just saw. I think I sent it to you.
hasn't come yet.
Did I actually hit the
Ah,
delivered?
there it is.
Did your dog do that with his tongue?
No, he didn't, but he licked a lot.
Well, Lola licks a lot, but this is I learned this from when I first got Lola. You know that the it's a breed. It's part of the border collie breed,
Yeah.
or it's some breeds do it and some don't.
Yeah. I had a border collie. I don't remember him doing it either, actually, but
I
I wasn't paying attention to that kind of thing then necessarily.
this is I'm sharing this because I'm with Lola. I'm paying attention to these things. Yesterday in Andrew's call,
Mm,
I feel proud of this because he had um some of the banter early on was actually this is with a guy that we might want to connect to who's in Oregon, and I'm going to talk to him one-on-one next week. He's an ecological engineer.
what's his name?
Um, um, John John Warner, Wariner, Warner.
Okay.
He's new to GRC.
Okay.
I'm going to find out next week what the heck he means by an ecological engineer. But I compliment on his jacket because because it looked like a really great jacket, and we talked about he hates being cold, and we talked about what temperature do you keep your house, blah blah blah. Um, so then when we in the in our what's on our mind, I shared that in the moment that one of the things I did in the minute of silence is I turned around and put a blanket on Lola, even though Lola was wearing her little jacket.
Mhm.
And I said, I pointed out that, I used to believe that dog beds were ridiculous and that dogs don't need beds. But now I've learned that dogs really love their beds.
Yeah.
And Lola really loves to be warm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and actually this last night, Ruth, I was sleeping on the sofa when Ruth got home. Ruth works really hard, but so, Lola was in her sleeping bag and she got up to get cheese, and Ruth, after Lola had cheese, she went back to the sleeping bag and Ruth covered her up and she did the licking thing.
Uh,
Anyway, so I made the comment that I put a blanket over Lola, and I learned that that to take care of taking care of Lola is keeping her warm. But Andrew made a point that was like that was an example of empathy, so that we could talk about
yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yep.
that
Yep. I'm thinking about doing an article on empathy in government. What does it look like?
wow, that's a how about empathy and culture.
Yeah.
That also gets back to the trusting nature.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
It's
not
yeah.
gonna if we don't have empathy for nature,
Yeah.
if we don't understand our connection to it, that's
Well, see, we've been socialized to think that nature has nothing to do with us. We're separate from it. We're different. We're above and beyond it. Oh, my daughter's home.
All right, so one last, so you put this into your, sometimes when I'm really honoring, you probably heard me say this last point here, is that I like to sometimes say that our moment of separation with nature was in 1413 with the invention of perspective.
And I think it went to the fall of the garden.
Well, I think we've had this conversation, and what I would say is that that's a this is not something, this is above my pay grade, but the the Western notion of perspective, the single view, man in the middle, man in the center, is part of Western Christian thinking.
Oh yeah, those are all,
And,
they all
and,
come from.
but that's to me is um but the perspective thing is a specific way of looking at things
Yeah, it's a
that
lever
has
to keep
shaped
it
us.
separate. It's one of the tools we've developed to make sure that stays. Yeah.
Okay, I promise this, but okay. I've been looking into this issue about, and I'm going to share this. There's two paintings by Brock. You're
Okay.
art. You know George
I
Brock?
feel I feel I need to go. So,
Okay, we'll talk later.
okay. Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye, Catherine. I'll share it with you in a writing.
Okay.